I call to order the regular city council meeting for Monday, October 16th at 5:30 PM. At this time, I'd ask you to please silence your cell phones to limit interruptions. Moving on to item number 1 on the agenda, that is the roll call.
Burlingame.
Here.
Evans. Janser.
Here.
Olson. Bittner. Pajagula.
Here.
Ross.
Here. Moving on to item 2, that's Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and join.
Which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving on to item number 3, the mayor's report, just a couple of items a couple of meetings and events I attended since the last meeting. One was a retirement celebration for Tom Dupre. He retired after 40-plus years of serving the city of Minot in the transportation. Did speak to the first graders at Longfellow. We had a Task Force 21 meeting, chamber board, and did attend the big event sponsored by the Girl Scouts over the weekend at Minot State University, and wrapping it up today with interview panels for the assistant city manager. Very strong candidates for that as well. One thing I do want to mention, moving on to the action items, when we get to that point, I think we do have, I would entertain a motion to move 7.3 up to 7.1, seeing how the public hearing on 7.1 may take some time. So when we get to that, I would definitely entertain a motion that we move 7.3 up to 7.1. So if there is nothing for me, we can move on to the city manager's report. Harold.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. As is typical, the city manager memo is outlined and available to the public in the city council packet. I'd be happy to entertain any questions. I will note as well, for interest of the council or the public, I did provide kind of a executive summary of projects currently underway or that may be coming in the near future for conversation by the council that is probably worth some attention. Would I be happy to answer any questions at this time?
Are there any questions of Harold? If not, we will move on to item 5 on the agenda, consider the report of the Planning Commission, and that is item 5.1, public hearing zoning map amendment outlet 49. Now is the time for those who wish to speak either in favor of or against this zoning map amendment to step forward.
I'll do a motion to open the public hearing. Do
What's
we have
that?
to do a motion to open the public hearing?
No, just to close it.
Just to close it? Okay.
Is there anybody who wishes to speak either in favor of or against? If not, what are the wishes of the council?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mark.
I move we close the public hearing and approve the item as recommended by the Planning Commission.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Scott. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Janser.
Yes.
Pajagula.
Yes.
Ross.
Yes.
Burlingame.
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
That motion carried. Moving on to item 5.2, public hearing zoning map amendment, First Anthony Hill addition. Now is the opportunity for those who wish to speak either in favor of or against this zoning map amendment to step forward. Second call for anyone to step forward to speak either in favor of or against the zoning map amendment. Seeing none, what are the wishes of the council?
Mr. Mayor?
Mark?
I move we close the public hearing and approve the item as recommended.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
A second.
Second by Scott. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Janser.
Yes.
Pajagula.
Yes.
Ross.
Yes.
Burlingame.
Yes.
Evans.
Motion carried. Moving on to item 6 on the agenda, that's our consent item. We've got 20 items on our consent agenda. At this time, if there's any wishes to have any of those items pulled, please make that known right now. There's nothing to be pulled. What are the wishes of the council? Mark?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move passage of the consent items.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Any further discussion? If not, please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Motion carried. Moving on to item 7, action items. I know we have more than a few people here for the public hearing, so I would entertain a motion to move 7.3 up on the agenda.
So moved.
We have a motion by Steve. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Mark. Any further discussion?
I am not going to support it just because I think we should just move everything, like, not just 7.3. Right? I think if we're going to put 7.3 at the top, 7.1 should go to the bottom. Like, and we should just start with 7.2 and work our way down.
Well, actually, we need to act on 7.1 before 7.2.
Okay, but then move 7.3 and 7.4 above those two. Like, why leave 7.4 hanging there?
If I may, Mayor,
Go ahead.
7.4 is primarily a staff item.
I know, but it's
So-
just the principle, right? Like, if we're, you know,
Is that okay
gonna
with the motion
accommodate
maker?
people, then like, I want to do it with some principle to it. And so if we're going to move 7.1 and 7.2 down, then 3 and 4 should go up, even though 4 is mostly a staff issue. But you guys have the votes to,
Did you make that motion, Steve?
Sure.
Okay. Are you okay with moving 7.4 up
You okay
above?
with combining them?
Yeah.
Sure. I'll change my motion then.
Okay. Is that okay with the second?
Yep.
Okay. So the motion is to move 7.3 and 7.4 up and move 7.1 and 7.2 down on that agenda. Is there any discussion? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, please call the roll.
Padragula.
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Evans,
yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Moving on to item 7.3, the consideration of the Magic Fund request from Hot Switch Heating Systems. What are the wishes of the council?
A motion to approve the request?
We have a motion for approval. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Well, if I may, Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
I will just know that the applicant is present, so if the council has any questions, as well as representatives from MACDC who have helped assist through this process.
Anything, Steve? Oh, okay. I
No,
thought
I
you had
think
your hand.
the
raised.
materials that accompany it were very thorough, and I know I learned a lot about hot switch heating systems.
Is there any further discussion? Nothing further? Please call the roll.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Padragula.
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes. Moving on to item 7.4, the Nedrow Sewer District ownership transfer. What are the wishes of the council?
Mr. Mayor, I'd move the item.
We have a motion by Mark. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Carrie. Is there any discussion?
Could Mr. Sorensen come up for a question? So are there any, like, downsides to taking ownership, like,
Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Evans, no. Basically, this project was built by Ward County Water Resources about 20 years ago, and we've been operating it and maintaining it under an agreement with them. We do the billing for it, so really, nothing really changes from our standpoint, other than we have total ownership of it once this is done, so.
okay. That's all I had. I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you, Jason. Any other questions or, that's Jason, okay. Any further discussion? If not, please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Now moving back to the former item 7.1, public hearing on the Streetlight District 65 Dakota Homes Edition. At this time, we will open it up for testimony But first, we'll have an update from our city engineer, Lance Meyer. Lance, the mic is yours.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I wanted to walk you through just a little bit of logistics so everyone's kind of aware of how this process works. So on special assessment projects such as this, your previous actions passed a series of resolutions to get us up to this point. The project went through a 30-day protest period, and what state law requires is for any resident within the within the district area, if they protest the project, to submit a written letter of protest. So Century Code says it must be written. We did receive several from the neighborhood. Some statistics for you. There were 112 protest letters received out of 217 properties. That's 51.6%. State law also requires that in order for the protest to bar proceeding or stop the district, you would need greater than 50% of the land area to protest. There's 2.58 million square feet in this district and 1 million square feet protested, so that's 38.8%. What that means is, by state law, this district could proceed if council so wished, or council could choose to stop the project if they so wish. The reason why there's two separate agenda items here is because the public is afforded a public hearing to come to you and address any concerns they have, state any objections. They go in the record, but they don't count towards the land area because the law requires the written letter of protest. So it's really an opportunity for them to come and talk to you about their thoughts on the project. The subsequent agenda item coming up is the award of bid for the project. So that would be the time where you either award the project bid and then the project would move forward through the special assessment process, or you could stop the project by rejecting the bid and the project wouldn't move forward. And there's a couple other options kind of in between there that I've detailed out. So when we get to that point, if you have additional questions, I'd be happy to try to walk you through that.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Steve?
I have a quick technical question. When you say in writing, does that include email or not?
It has to be written and sent to the city auditor. So we take that as mailing. Or they can hand deliver, which the neighborhood did. So they
Emails
had,
don't count.
most of these came in by hand delivery. I think there's 2 that were mailed in.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of Lance? Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome.
Now we will open this up for public hearing. Anybody who wishes to speak in favor of or against can please step to the dais.
Hi, I'm James Opposito, 105 25th Street Southwest. I'm in that district. I think it's a community, not a district to myself. But this starts way back in the 69 flood when the water stopped on the corner of 2nd Avenue Southwest and 24th Street, the east corner. Okay, so a lot of us that were here then and had bought the place from his parents like I did, we knew where the water stopped. So when we were going to hit the flood in 2011, we didn't move anything. Okay, now because of that, I have a triple mortgage. I don't have any more money. I'm on a disability. I've had 2 failed back surgeries. I can't afford this. We were told that if we got half of these letters for 220 homes, that this would be stopped, and then all of a sudden there's some land thing comes up. Well, we sure weren't aware of it. We had a meeting where a lot of people showed up. And we asked any one of you guys to show up. Not one showed up. Not one. We went over it. We thought, okay, well, it isn't just $2,500 at an average per household. If you pay it up front, you don't pay no interest. If you can't afford it, you have to pay interest. Anywhere from 0% to 15, 20, we don't even know what you're going to do. Then, top all that off, the bid, the estimate is $1 million, we figured, around that. Okay, that's not the truth. It can go up 40%. So when we're talking $32.63 front foot, that isn't what it's gonna be. That estimate will go up, and it can go up legally 40%. This community, these people, one guy left because he just couldn't handle it no more because he's working. He's 80 years old. And he's got a double mortgage because of the flood. I have a triple mortgage. Most of these people have double mortgages. We just can't do it no more. This has to be reconsidered. We got other alternatives. The Magic Fund. Assess the whole city. That would cost what? Each house $5? And then when it comes down the road, the next group of people lose their lights. Okay, $5, city assessment. We'd all be willing to do that, but we're not willing to pay the $2,500 up to $4,000 in a 10-year stretch. And that's what it would take for me to pay it. Thank you.
I don't see why not. Yeah, she can. Okay. My name is Jennifer Rockwell, and I live in the Special Assessment District 65, that's looking at the replacement of the lights. And upon receiving the letter from the city stating that the residents would be responsible for that $32.63 per front and corner lots being assessed an additional side footage, my neighbor, Bonnie, and I had some questions and thought our residents of the neighborhood might as well. And we organized a meeting, found a place, and went door to door to the places on the highlighted map, inviting our neighbors to come and just have a discussion about what was going on. As we walked around, we heard many stories about how people were barely making ends meet with fixed incomes, disability, the double cost of grocery bills and other goods, and all without their income going up in proportion to what they were experiencing. They were concerned that they would no longer be able to afford to live in their homes, and that even an extra $20 a month would have them reconsidering if they could afford to stay in their longtime family homes. People asked if there was a petition for them to sign, which we did not have. Some expressed that they didn't drive due to bad hips or limited vision and couldn't come to the meeting. Some did not receive a letter from the city, did not know how to protest, or did not have access to a computer to send an email. 2 days before the meeting, which was on October 1st, we put together a basic protest letter that conformed to the North Dakota Century Code. We asked the city engineer if the letter would suffice, and we were assured that it was correct. And previously, we had asked how many people were needed to have signed this petition, to have the letters of protest turned in. And he indicated that half of all residents represented on the map needed to sign. One neighbor gave us the number of 220 lots that were on the map sent to us. So our number of protest letters that we printed off were 110, imagining that that would stop the special assessment. It was also asked over the phone what would happen if 50% protested. The answer was that we just wouldn't have streetlights. This is not what the residents want. They expressed at the October 1st meeting that they wanted their streetlights turned back on, but not on the backs of our already increasing property taxes, as well as the cost of what was looking to be a few $1,000s per household. City Council was invited to the meeting, as was Lance Meyer, to answer some questions, but none were able to attend. We did ask them at the last minute because everything was done at the last minute. We collected all of these and organized this within a week's time. The residents wanted to feel safe in their neighborhood, but were more willing to put up their own sensory flood or spotlights than to have to pay for the special assessment. We were told that we could pay off the assessment fee in one lump sum or spread it out over 10 years, but with interest. And again, as the last gentleman just said, the interest rate was unknown. On Friday, this last Friday, the agenda came out that stated that we had 112 out of the 217 properties that had protested. It also indicated that this number represented the 38.88% of the properties protesting in this area, and that because it did not go over 50% of the projected area, that it did not meet the special assessment requirement of 50% of the area to object. That was the first time that we had heard anywhere in letter or in verbal writing or in email that we needed to have 50% of the area protest. I asked, is the protest of a smaller area of property representing one household not worth the same as a large area of property? Every household's vote should count as one complete vote against, regardless of the size of their lot. The number of residents that are represented and oppose the special assessment is over the 50% mark. More homes in the area are opposed to it than support it. There are a few places on the map that, as concerned neighbors, we noticed in the assessment area. There are at least 5 houses that no one is living in that we went to. We could not contact the owners for an opportunity to sign the petition, as there was nobody there. There are at least 12 buildings which are owned by LLCs in the area where we could not contact those owners. Of all the people that we did talk to, only 5 stated that they did not want to sign a letter of protest. We never forced anybody to do anything. We just were showing them because we were asked by people who were immobilized, is there a letter to sign? My conclusion is that if everyone was asked and had to either agree to pay it as a special assessment or to protest it, that the number of households represented would be more than the 51%. Part of the property included on the map is Leach Park, a part of the Parks District. Do they count for that area? That is a large portion of land. We don't know the answer to that. Again, my conclusion is that if everyone was asked, ensuring that their mail came through, because some people said they never even got the letter in the mail, and that they had a way to respond and understood the issue and their time constraints, that the area, which is what's required, would be over the 50% mark. People do not expect to have high property taxes, for which my home alone has doubled over the last 5 years, as well as have special assessments added on. The letter I received from the city this summer that I have here today indicates that my taxes from 2022 to 2023 experienced a 75% increase. I know that no one in my family or anyone I know in the community has had a 75% increase in their wages this last year. We all want a safe community and we all want to be fiscally responsible for what we have been given, and we expect the same from our city. We want the city to provide our safety, and we want the city to be fiscally responsible. You have estimated that over $60 million would be collected into the general fund for 2024, the majority from our property taxes, at an estimated over $20 million collected. The debt service fund will receive $6 million, part of which comes from property taxes and is designed to fund street lighting, among other things. There is also fluidity in the budget to move expenses from one section to the other. This is where we are asking the city to provide for its residents and pull the money from, and not from a special assessment. I do not feel included, and I don't believe the other 51% of the neighbors who were able to sign the letter of protest do either when our requests are being passed over, which is what the agenda said today, that it was going to recommend that it go through with the special assessment, despite the numbers that we had. We do not feel safe in our environment when the lights are off. We do not feel engaged when the city will do what it wants, despite the majority of the residents opposing it. I know that the city of Minot has goals and visions and standards by which the council makes its decisions. This special assessment is revealing some discrepancies between what you want and what you are delivering. It is not showing your goals of excellence or connectivity when it does not feel like the city has been fiscally responsible enough to repair streetlights, yet can bid to buy up new land. We want to collaborate with the city to have high-quality services brought to us, which is also your goal. You are not demonstrating your ability to be dynamic and flourishing when you cannot adapt to a new way of strategizing growth except for overtaxing of the residents coupled with additions of special assessments. You are not demonstrating the ability to be resilient and prepared when the lights in our neighborhood have been off since last year. Your challenge for the future is to be able to serve the community without losing the middle class, who can no longer afford to live in the city with high prices of goods, high taxes, and wages that have not come up to meet those needs. The people who live and serve in your community will become disgruntled and have lack of enthusiasm for a city that has failed the common man to make itself attractive just to businesses that they are trying to appease and lure. That is what is being said on the street as we talk to our neighbors. Your goal of safe and welcoming are missing when levels of public safety such as the streetlights are missing, and we cannot engage with our city leaders or felt heard when we call meetings and invite you to them. 4 aspirations will now drive this decision the council has to make to help reach the goal of a thriving, resilient, safe, and connected community, and I urge you guys to make the right choice. Don't accept the special assessment. Find the money in the budget somewhere else that has already been collected, either from this year's budget or next year's, to have our streetlight fixed in the most reasonable, safe, and inclusive way. Welcome.
No, I'm gonna ruin it. That was very nice. My name's Bonnie Segura, and I live in the Street Lighting District 65, our community. We did speak to almost 200 people, I'm going to say, if not more, about this issue. So we're really educated on the vibe, on, you know, everyone's opinion, just so you guys know. On Tuesday, September 28th, I asked Lance Myers, what does it mean to protest this project? I had no idea. I've never protested a project before. Sad to say, I've never been to a meeting here before. Sorry about that. He quickly explained to me over the phone, if over 50% of my neighbors do not want this project to happen, it will not pass city council, and we won't have streetlights, and it's that simple. That's what I got out of it. There was no century code, area, mass, no, that was it. So that's what we went off of, right? We got 51.6% to protest this project. That's a majority, right? That's what we got. Pretty successful. Thanks, guys, by the way. Actions taken to the district will set a precedent to future street lighting districts. We're the first of many. It sounds like we're the first street lighting district to happen, right? I recommend that you proceed with the project, award the bid, but not special assess the cost. That's all I have to say.
Did you guys have any questions for us, considering that we spoke to so many of the individuals? I know that they can speak for themselves, but just if you want to know what we heard when we had our meeting, like the vibe of the room, any of that. You want any feedback from that?
Steve?
I just had a comment, and maybe defensive, but I was in Washington DC when you had your meeting and was not able to attend.
Right. Yes, and we did receive.
It was very last minute. This
Yeah,
all
and I think it
happened
was
within
you
a
that sent
week.
me an email that said I wasn't in town, was not able to. And as part of it, Mr. Myers had also said that his office had COVID during that time, right? Like on the Wednesday before, he had said, I have COVID, my assistant has COVID. I said, if there's somebody from your office that can come and just answer some questions, just because there are a lot that seem to be coming up, just as we're going through on our own. And then once we started talking to neighbors, there were even more questions that had arisen, such as new lights that were put on 24th Avenue just last year, and why weren't they up to code? Or if after the flood in 2011, why wasn't the lighting assessed at that time and then brought up to code? The lights that are in Leach Park are on currently, but Leach Park is in the assessed area. Are they up to code? Like, there just kept on being this snowball of more and more questions once we started asking questions that I'm sure some of the other residents will come up here and have a comment on as well. So there was a lot. It was a lot to unpack. And it was a very short amount of time that we went around starting to talk to people before we had to have all the letters delivered before the October 8th deadline of having them in, which was a Sunday. So it wasn't like they could be hand delivered on a Sunday or the Saturday before, right? Like, we had to get them in. And even if they were mailed on the Monday, we didn't trust that the mail going down to Bismarck and back would get them here in time for that time, which is why we hand delivered them. Like, Bonnie and I hand delivered 93 that day. And then we had another person who said, I collected 7 more. And then since then, 12 more had come in. So it wasn't like people didn't want to do it. As soon as they were given the opportunity to protest, they did. They didn't say, like I said, there were 5 people who I spoke to that said no, aside from the people who I could not get access to because of empty houses, like owners of those houses, or the LLCs that owned the duplexes along 2nd Avenue. who they couldn't sign. They said, well, I don't own this house. I'm just renting here. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you both. Now's the opportunity for those who wish to address the council, either for or against. Last call. Seeing that there are none, what are the wishes of the council?
According to North Dakota Century Code, I would like to recommend City Council declare the protest insufficient to bar proceeding with the Special Assessment District.
We have a motion. Is there a second? We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion.
So,
Carrie?
thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the Century Code is state law. I mean, we take an oath as city council members to uphold the city law and state law. If you're not happy with the state, we still have a second agenda item, which is the bid. But on this one, it is a clear legal question. Did the threshold under North Dakota Century Code, Section 402218, get met? The question is no, it did not. It is not legally sufficient. And that is,
Please, please.
so that is why I'm following, I've taken an oath to uphold and follow state law, and the state law, as it is written right now, says that.
Is there any further discussion? Scott?
Yeah, I just want to make a few comments here. First off, to everybody here that worked on the protest of this, that worked forward of it, it's great advocacy, great work on your part. I said it the last time when we talked about this, and I'll just throw it out now because it's my mic. I hate special assessment zones. I hate everything about them. I don't like it. I like the fact that Minot doesn't use them the way that other communities do. I also understand too that citizen advocacy and citizen engagement like this can be extraordinarily frustrating when you come up against laws like this that don't make a lot of sense. There's not oftentimes within our laws that we don't look at people as having a certain amount of, each individual person is having weight, but rather as the amount of land. But unfortunately, that is the way that the state wrote this law and the way that we are, forced to do it. With all that being said, yeah, I appreciate you all. And I couldn't make it the night of your protest because I was ill. I had all intention to and did not make it. Also, I just want to give you a little bit of a heads up in general when you're inviting all members of a city council. If more than a majority of us are there, it becomes a public meeting. And if we haven't publicly noticed that in advance, we can get in trouble for that. So it really makes it hard when we get I think it was a Friday afternoon, we got our invite to that, to know if everybody's going to be there. So that makes it really hard for us to attend a short notice like that when it's talking about city business. So just so you know, that was also a factor in making the decision. But I was going to come anyways, but again, I was ill that day. So.
Are not.
Thank you.
You're not hearing us.
Jim?
We don't have
Jim?
the money. We don't have the money, Carrie. I don't have the money.
Jim, please sit, please. Please. No.
Should've.
Steve,
by law.
did you have any comments? Carrie?
Sir,
Carrie,
first of all, they
hold on,
can't
Carrie,
address me individually,
Carrie.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Carrie.
They can't, no, you have to, point of order.
Okay. Steve, did you have comments? You mentioned.
I mean, again, action item 7.2 is more flexible. We can then discuss what we're going to do. We can either pay for it as a city, we can increase our contribution, we can not do the special assessment, or we can, that. But this is not the item, people. This is a clear legal question, yes or no. Action item 7.2 is where we have room to move and wrangle around. This is not that item.
Steve?
I guess I agree with Carrie. I don't think we have any choice about this, but I guess I just want to make sure that staff have a boilerplate language to inform people, and that we're always, following that. I trust that we did in this case, but I just want to just make sure that we do have a standard response to people, and that it's been vetted by our lawyer, and that we uniformly set it out. The other thing is when it comes time to the legislature, I'm also troubled by this fact that emails aren't accepted, and I'd ask us to bring that up when the next session starts to give people more of an opportunity. I can see having things in writing, but I think email now is deemed by most people as being in writing, and if we could ask the legislature to reconsider that part of the requirement. I think right now we're stuck with it. But I think in the interest of encouraging people to participate and making it easier for them to voice their feelings, we should bring that up when it comes lobbying time.
Thank you. Any other comments? If nothing further, we do have a motion and a second. If there's nothing further, please call the roll.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Quadrigula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Burlingame?
Yes.
Moving on to item 7.2 on the agenda, that is the Street Lighting District 65 Dakota Homes Edition Award of Bid. What are the wishes of the council? What are the wishes of the council?
I would recommend we award the bid to Maine Electric Construction.
We have a motion to award the bid to Maine. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Steve?
I wanted to ask a couple of questions of staff. I guess, first of all, in terms of the deterioration of the lighting in that area, was that flood related? Did the flood ruin the electrical supply system there?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman, Quadrigula, no. This is just a combination of age and a combination of streetlights not having grounding anymore. Well, they never did. So because they're metal poles, because
Jim.
Jim.
Tell us who cut it.
Please.
Because over time, as the wire inside the pole starts to age, it'll start to fray. We're concerned with the fact that that wire to metal contact without it being grounded could cause
Can't get people electrocuted.
Right. So that's why we made the decision to turn lights off.
The second question I have is in terms of what policy, if any, we have regarding these kinds of things. I know for new developments, for new housing and new areas, that we ask the developer, either directly or through levying some sort of payment on the residents to pay for things like lighting. I had that happen in my neighborhood, actually. It was an older neighborhood, but one of the neighbors wanted lighting, and he took around a petition, and we signed it, and we got, I think we paid something like $1,700 for lighting because the city didn't have a policy back then requiring lighting. But the general principle, I think, has been that if you have property and you want it lit, you got to pay for it, either initially or subsequently. Am I correct in understanding?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Quadrigula, you are correct. So, this is our 65th street lighting district, so it's not like our first rodeo here.
Right.
But most of them have been throughout the years. Neighborhoods are requesting the city to put them in because there's a time period where in new developments they didn't have them. So most of the core of the city, if you look around, there's a wood pole with a light on top of it. Those are owned by Xcel Energy. That was the city's first street lighting, if you will. And then as the city continued to develop over time, street lighting systems weren't required. Now they're required. So you'll have some older neighborhoods, maybe they're a few decades old, that want to come in and have street lighting. We hand them a petition, and then they go around, and if 50% of the land area is in favor of the petition to put them in, then we bring that to council, and then the assessment district moves through. The only one that's probably close enough for comparison to this district will be what we did downtown. So downtown, when we reconstructed the infrastructure, there was a street lighting special assessment district. That was District 64. And then there's a storm sewer assessment district. So much like this project, the city paid for a portion of that replacement, and then the remainder of it was special assessed to the benefiting property owners downtown Minot.
Follow up on that. Do we have any policy about replacing lights that have deteriorated or somehow been damaged or whatever?
Well, and I think that's kind of what we're looking at tonight. We've had precedent in the past of the city contributing to the replacement of street lighting infrastructure systems. But I think because these are probably going to become more common as old systems like this start to fall apart. We have a system in Minot that needs to be replaced. The poles are about 90 years old from what we can gather. And our traffic staff is very good, but at some point you just can't put any more money into them. It's just, we can't find parts and those sort of things. So we have areas around town as the city continues to age, this question is going to keep coming up. So
This will set a precedent then.
this is a precedent thing, and we want to be consistent in that.
And if I could just clarify what the percentage is in terms of the city trying to spread the cost around versus the residents having to pay for it. In this case, it's all residents, am I correct?
30%.
There is 30% is what the city's contributing. The city of Minot owns 2 small lots within the district. That's where we have a couple of water wells. And Leach Park is in this district as well. They actually have the highest assessment.
So this residents will be asked to pick up 70% of the tab.
Yes, that's correct.
Jim. We're trying to do the business, Jim. Go ahead.
And the 30% would come from sales tax infrastructure reserves.
I don't know if that's a question for you or for Dave Lakefield, but could we get a sense of whether there are any alternatives to paying more for that from the citizenry or the government at large, rather than putting it on the backs of these particular residents? Is there another source of money we could use? Today we found out that there were, $7 to $10 million in the utilities budget, reserve funds, or water, I guess, the specific account.
That can't be,
Right, I know that can't be used, but is there some other source of money like that?
then we'd be setting a precedent.
I know.
If I may, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
The most flexible source of funding that I believe that you have access to would potentially be Hub City funding, which would be basically our oil revenues that come in. We've been saving that money to do larger projects like Puppy Dog Coulee, stormwater retention, those kinds of things. But there is flexibility and discretion of the council on how those funds are used in the future to meet community needs. I will echo the concern of the city engineer that we have lots of infrastructure that's been around for a while. I believe this infrastructure was installed back in the 60s, if
That's
I
our
remember
best
correctly.
guess, yeah.
Right? I don't know how many of us are still driving cars from the 60s. And if you are driving one and if it's in good condition, you probably invested a lot of money in restoring that, or you just took immaculate care of it. And so the infrastructure is aging. And typically the way this infrastructure gets installed is how Minot has handled this. And it usually gets installed by the developer when they're developing the land and building the houses and putting in the streets and all those kinds of things. So the taxpayers don't really pay for it at that point. And then we have responsibility for paying the light bill, keeping those on, and those kinds of things. So I'm sympathetic, and I appreciate the work that these citizens have done. I understand the frustration with financial pressures. I think a lot of us feel that right now. But I do agree with the city engineer with regards to we are setting precedents here, and it is at the discretion of the council how much of this you want to spread out over all the taxpayers of the community as has been requested tonight, or how much of that needs to be paid for by those who benefit more directly from it. And I think that's kind of the crux of the conversation that we're having this evening. It's not an easy decision. And so I do understand those concerns. I cannot speak to what was or was not communicated previously. I do concur with Alderman Burlingame that an invitation to the whole council, we do have to be careful to make sure that we're not violating open meeting laws and those kinds of things. I would have liked to have had the opportunity to come and meet with the citizens with regards to this matter. I was not extended an invitation, and even if it had been extended, I'd already made previous commitments to be out of town on other city business during this time period, but I would have been happy to meet and do so. Again, this is a difficult conversation, a difficult decision, and it is up to the council whether you want to stay at covering 30% of it, or whether you want to move that up, anywhere between that up to 100%. But again, my concern would be shared with the city engineer that whatever we do here in future projects, as other infrastructure continues to age, we kind of become painted into a corner, and I don't think it's good business for us to decide that one neighborhood gets to pay 70%, another one gets to pay nothing, and another one gets to pay 25%. I think there needs to be some consistency through that process. We do assess a property tax, but that goes to more things than just streetlights. That's what we use for maintaining the street and replacing the street and doing the mill and overlays over the front of them. It's what we use to pay for police and fire to respond, and 911 call costs, and a multitude of other things. And the city is facing the same pressures that each of these citizens have justly addressed this evening with the council, and we're seeing those same increases in what it costs us to provide service, with little to no appetite of increasing our revenues to meet that. So, again, it's a difficult decision. I'd be happy to answer any more questions that the council may have with regards to this. But this is aging infrastructure, and we're going to continue to have aging infrastructure.
Any questions of Harold?
I do have a
Okay,
question
Carrie?
for Lance. It could be a Dave question. What was the percentage cut in Lighting District 64?
Off the top of my head, I don't know that answer.
Mr. Lakefield, do you? Was it more?
I think it was
less?
more than 30%, but I don't know the exact number.
Okay. How could we find that out?
We would have to go back through the project and see how much the city contributed. Finance would have to pull that information for us.
Well, given that, I would like to see that. I mean, that was a precedent setting then. If we did that with Lighting District 64, I would like to be consistent with what we did with Lighting 64, and I think we need to defer this decision until, at least I cannot make a decision until I know what percentage we did in the previous. I may like to be consistent. We talked about that consistency, and so I would make a motion to defer our action until we can have that information.
What specific information? I'm not clear, I'm sorry.
For lighting, there's a street lighting district 64, a special assessment district before this.
This is 65.
I know, but 64.
So you want to see what we did back
I
then?
want to see the percentage the city contributed to 64.
Okay. I wanted, if I could, address the
But
issue.
like my motion to table, I think supersedes, doesn't it?
Yes, it would supersede the, it
Yep.
would supersede the main motion, so you'd have to move on the motion to table.
So we have a motion to table?
I would motion table till we find out what the percentage is of the lighting district 64 city contribution.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is this debatable? It is. Is there any further discussion? Mark?
If we're going to table this to find that out, I'd also like, maybe Mr. Lakefield's going to solve this on the spot, I don't know. But if we're going to table this to find out that number, I'd also like to know what the source of the funds were that were used, because
Sure.
that was a rather complicated project with some
Yep.
money that came through feds based on the flood and so forth. So I mean, I guess
So unless
I-
Mr.
I
Lakefield
wanna
knows
make
the
sure-
answer, I would love to add that to the motion.
I want to make sure that we're talking apples to
Yeah,
apples.
exactly.
And I would agree with that, too. as a
Mr.
second.
Lakefield? Do you have some information?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the comptroller is looking this information up as we speak, so we should have an answer momentarily.
Okay. Like elevator music. We need like
We take a brief recess?
mission music.
Need a motion to recess? I'll entertain a motion for a 5-minute recess.
Motion to have a 5-minute recess.
Second.
Coming back at.
We have a motion
How
and a
about to
second.
6:30?
Come back at 6:30.
Is that okay? That's, all right. Oh,
Any discussion? If not, please call the roll.
Evans?
yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Quadrigula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Burlingame.
Yes.
We will recess until 6:30.
you can.
Yeah.
All right, I call the city council meeting back in session. We do have some updated information from our city's finance director, Mr. Lakefield.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Street Lighting District 64, which was part of the larger downtown project, the total project was approximately 2.4 million. Roughly half of that was funded by special assessments. The other half was funded by an EDA grant that the city had received.
Thank you, Dave. Any other questions?
So to clarify,
Carrie.
none of the Lighting District 64, the city contribution came out of city tax dollars. It was all grants from either state or federal entities?
Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Evans, that is correct. The portion that was not special assessed was federal funding.
Okay.
And it's Scott.
Dave, while you're up here, can you answer the question that was asked from the audience earlier? What is the interest rate if it's special assessed over 10 years? And is that variable or?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Burlingame, I don't know that until we actually take those bonds to market, because what we'll do is we'll package these up with any other debt that we intend to issue. They'll go through a financial planner and they'll go out and be sold on the bond market, and we'll come up with an average rate. If we use a 10-year life, which I think is anticipated in this special assessment district, typically the bonds have different interest rates depending on the maturity length of that individual bond. And then we end up with a blended rate that we apply across the issuance to calculate the interest that's due. So until we actually go to market, we won't know an actual rate. In today's environment, I can give you a range, but that literally changes on a daily basis.
And then once that's set, though, it's set at the same amount for the entire 10 years, correct?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Burlingame, that is correct.
Are there any other questions? Steve?
Yeah, for the benefit of the public, could you give us that rough estimate, realizing it's very rough and tentative and subject to the markets, which nobody can predict?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Padragula, given the markets today, I would estimate that this would be in the range of 4 to 5%. However, I wouldn't anticipate going to market with these bonds until roughly October or November of next year. So those rates could be more favorable by that time, or they could have deteriorated further as well. So it's impossible to tell at this point.
Carrie?
I would like to amend the main motion.
We still have to deal with the motion to table, which is on the floor right now.
Oh.
So we have a motion to table, and we do have a second. We're in discussion of the
Well,
the motion
it
to
was my
table.
motion, so I'll withdraw the motion.
Once you
Oh,
make a
we
motion,
did.
it's on the floor, so it belongs to the council. So if there's no further discussion on the motion to table,
No, I can withdraw the motion. We've went over this.
Does the second agree with the withdrawal?
Yes.
And is there any objection amongst the council to withdrawal of the motion? Is there any objection? Okay, the
No
objection
objection.
can be, the motion can be considered withdrawn.
which
So we're
brings us
back to-
back to the original motion of approving the original bid.
Which is my motion, right, Michaela? Mr. Mayor, can I amend that motion, please?
Correct. Go ahead.
I would like to amend that motion to proceed with the special assessment at a 35% city contribution. That would increase our contribution from 216,000 or 215,000 to 250,000.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second, a motion to amend and a second. Is there any further discussion? Carrie?
So as Harold alluded to, I mean, these are the days where, I think hopefully people appreciate what the hard choices we have to make. So we have, these are our choices, right? We proceed as proposed, we pay 30%. We proceed with the special assessment and change the cost share, which I just proposed. we pay for all of it as a city, or we just don't do it. And I would be remiss if I don't remember the people in this council chambers who have been here for a few months talking about our budget and imploring us on council to be as prudent as we can be with taxpayer money. And, although the budget we passed, I think, did not satisfy everybody, we certainly heard, from the people who were here at all of our budget meetings about trying to curb city spending, and paying for this entire project not only would be inconsistent with what we do with projects like this, but also, I think, not be mindful of the voices we've heard in the past few months about the spending of the city. So those are our four choices. And, we do no lights, we pay a percentage, or, the city pays for it all. And I am not comfortable with leaving a neighborhood without any lighting. I am not comfortable in paying for the 100% of this. And, while 30% is okay, let's try 35%. And I know it's not going to satisfy the residents of the community, but at some point, we have to make hard decisions up here. And, there are many, many people in the city that have the storm and sewer special assessments. And this is unfortunately part of living in a community and an infrastructure that is deteriorating. I mean, this is not going to be the first neighborhood that this is going to happen to. And unfortunately, we don't have a limitless, budget where we can pay for this all. So that is why I am proposing we go up to 35%. Thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, to me, this is an important issue because it probably will set a precedent. And the way I see it is it's a question of individual benefit, the light in front of your house or your intersection where your kids walk at night, versus the benefit to the community as a whole. I have no problem with people who develop an area having to pay for the improvements. That seems reasonable. That's a policy we've had for many years. That spreads the burden around, and the people who are primary beneficiaries, have to pay for that benefit. I think at some point, when an improvement has been in place, it becomes a community good, it becomes a community value, and it benefits all of us. And even lighting or storm sewer benefits us too. I may not live in a neighborhood, but if I drive my car through it and my car gets stuck because the water isn't drained away adequately, there's a cost to me. So I think that's the issue fundamentally, individual versus collective good. And I think Carrie's proposal of upping the city's contribution makes sense. I personally would like us to go probably a little bit further, but I don't think that'll be politically viable. So I think spreading the benefits between the community as a whole and the neighborhood is the way to do it. And I think 35% suggests itself as a reasonable kind of compromise. So I'll be supporting Carrie's motion.
Any other comments? Scott?
So I echo a lot of what has been said tonight. I will be voting against this motion only because I would rather see it closer to what downtown got at 50-50. Now, how do I know how to pay for that? Well, I appreciate the support. This is hard work up here, and everybody deserves a huge amount of respect for all the work that they're doing. So I don't do this for that reason. I just would rather see as we're going to set a precedent for that to be a precedent that we move towards setting.
I'd like to remind Alderman Burlingame that the 50-50 was not our money. That was all federal money. Like, this is our money. This is tax dollars. And, I would do 50-50 if this was, I would do 100 if this was a federal state grant, right? But it isn't. This is Minot City tax dollars. It's comparing apples to oranges, right? The downtown thing didn't take 1 penny out of the city coffers. This is taking $256,000 out of the city coffers. Not for this. No, we don't, ma'am.
Please, 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 please. Mark,
I'm really hesitant to do this in public, but I want to check the math here. So this full amount is $554,000.
No, it's 700. I'm looking on page 2 of 3
Oh, okay. Yep,
of Lance's
yep. Okay,
second memo. See where it's the 716,000?
yep, okay, that was correct.
any further discussion? Steve?
I did have a question for the finance director. In terms of the storm sewer, what is the allocation for that? 'Cause I know the same issue came up in terms of individual property owners benefiting versus the community as a whole, and I've forgotten what the numbers were.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Padragula, again, each project is looked at individually. Storm sewer projects are a little bit unique in that we assess a storm sewer development fee to cover a portion of those costs, and that's a fee that's attached to the utility bills each month, and we use that to fund some of those storm sewer improvement projects.
So there's not interest that people are paying?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Padragula, there is, in some of those cases, if a portion of the project is special assessed. And we recently had that happen in the area of 10th Street, I believe it was, Southwest, in one of the recent projects. We had some special assessment in that project as well.
Do you remember what the percentage was? Sorry.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Padragula, Lance reminds me it's 50%.
50 was special assessed.
That is correct. And then the bulk of the remainder, that is paid for with the storm sewer development fee.
The community as a whole pays that.
It's a fee that is assessed on the storm sewer bill that all utility customers pay each month.
And so if we have an old storm sewer that fails and we follow this process to repair it, half of it is charged directly to the people benefiting. And that district, storm sewer district, is usually pretty broad. And half of it comes out of the general funding mechanism.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Padragula, that was the case in that particular storm sewer district. And like I said, each project is looked at individually, depending on how large the benefiting area is, what it looks like downstream, those types of factors.
Do you have any idea what the range is in terms of local versus spread out costs? What's the variance here?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Padragula, on storm sewer special assessment projects, with the exception of downtown because of the federal funds that came into the project, those projects are always funded on a 50-50 basis, 50% special assessed, 50% through the storm sewer development fund. And that is in the special assessment policy that is on file. So that's what we as staff follow when we build these districts.
So getting back to my issue, my concern about equity and consistency, if you want a storm sewer in your neighborhood, you're building a new neighborhood, it all comes out of the developer's pocket and the resident's pocket in that neighborhood. On the other hand, if the storm sewers fail and need to be replaced at some point, it's 50-50. 50, the people who live there directly benefit, most directly benefit, and 50% everybody. Apart from having defined 50% of how much,
It would be 358,000.
how much of a problem would be defined, the 50%?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Padragula, that's always an option when we build these budgets. Typically, if we have anything that we budget to go to reserves, it typically means that we have a future need that we anticipate using those funds for. So as long as sales tax receipts continue to exceed forecast, we would probably have some additional money that's available to make that up. We're still a long ways through the end of 2024. If taxable sales decrease, we could end up short at the end of 2024. So that's always a calculated risk on where we would end up with that.
I wanted to ask the city manager a question in terms of his perspective on general policies throughout the country. And I guess theoretically, is there a difference, should there be a difference between things like storm sewers and lighting? Can we have a different percentage for each one, or is it better to have, the same, or does it make a difference?
Generally speaking, there is a separation of stormwater. A lot of communities actually set up stormwater funds with stormwater rates that are charged separately from sewer. So having the system that we do currently with stormwater is common across the country. I'm trying to think with regards to streetlights. I can't think of, in some communities, the cities don't even own the streetlights.
Right.
The power company owns those, and then the city's on the hook for paying the power bill. But typically, the electric companies would have the responsibility for setting up and operating and maintaining the actual lights. Here, which is not uncommon either, the city does own the infrastructure and have the responsibility for that. I'm not aware of any communities that set up a separate enterprise fund with a separate fee
Streetlights.
to support the replacement of those lights. It's not to say that you probably couldn't. We could explore that and talk about that. But typically those lights would be replaced potentially when the street is replaced. So if we were to come in and do a complete reconstruction of the subgrade of the road and then replace the surface, and we'd replace all the curbing and everything like that, that is typically when a city would replace the streetlight infrastructure as well. But I don't think we're doing that at this point. I think this came down to a safety factor where we discovered that, one, these lights were failing in as far as stability, and two is that we had a significant concern with regards to the lights are not grounded, and we did not want to potentially electrocute somebody. So this expedited the conversation, the replacement of the lights faster than the replacement of the road infrastructure out front. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, did you have something?
I was just following Steve's line of questioning, and I was going to make sure that the point was understood that in the case of the storm sewer, there is a existing fund that we are in an ongoing way collecting money to have funding to put in the percentage that we're putting in when we do a stormwater project. So that's, which we don't have for lighting.
So maybe we should be looking in our next budget at some sort of infrastructure in general replacement fund or source.
Is there any further discussion? Nothing further. The motion on the floor is,
Right now, the motion is to amend the original motion to 35%.
okay. We have a motion to amend. There's no further discussion. Please call the roll.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes,
Burlingame?
No.
Motion passes.
motion carries. Moving,
Yes, we still have the original.
oh, we still have the original motion out there. Okay, so the original motion has been amended to 35%. And,
Sorry.
go ahead.
The original motion is to award the bid to Maine Electric and include a 35% city contribution.
Is there any further discussion? There's nothing further. Please call the roll.
Evans? Yes. Janser?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Burlingame?
No.
Motion passes.
Moving on to item number 8 on the agenda, that is liaison reports. We can start with Mark.
Mr. Mayor, I was out of town for the MPO meeting. I have no other reports to give.
Scott.
Human Relations Commission ad hoc committee met last week. We're continuing to go through the ordinance and making improvements, and looking forward to hopefully having something for you by the December 18th, I believe it is, meeting. So.
Steve?
Want to invite everybody to the 50th anniversary open house of the Minot Commission on Aging this Wednesday from 2 to 4. There's an open house, tea, cookies, or coffee, cake, whatever.
I thought Anna sent me, I'm sorry,
Was I getting something wrong?
I thought Anna sent me something it was canceled, but I could be wrong, but it was pulled off my calendar, so I'll check into that while you.
Yeah, could we please put it on the website? Because I just got an invitation for it recently, and I haven't heard anything changing, so. The other thing, there were no other committees that I attended. Like I said, I was out of town for 2 weeks, and as frequently happens, I come back appreciating living in Minot a lot more, even with some of the disagreements we have. It really is refreshing to be here with clean air and quiet, and not the extent of social problems that exist in many of the major cities of the United States. So as much as I like traveling, it really is good to come home.
Carrie?
So I served as alternate when Mark was out for the MPO, the Central Dakota MPO Policy Board. We approved the executive director job description for that. And also, everybody present signed the letter to the governor requesting the MPO designation because it has to be officially requested. So that was sent off, and that had to be done by December 31st. So they're moving right along in, meeting the benchmarks. The library, if people haven't been over recently or read the Minot Daily, the Children's Library is being completely remodeled. It is closed down, but it is coming along, and it will be a fantastic space for our young people once it is complete. When the library board hired Zaina Moya as a new library director, she was the former adult services librarian. So that position has been filled now, and we have a new adult services librarian, Emily Ostland, started. So we have all of the sort of management supervisor positions filled over at the library. So things are going well.
And my liaison report was included in the mayor's report, so. There's nothing else on action item number 8. We will move on to action item 9, and that is personal appearances. Now is an opportunity for those who wish to come and address the council.
Hello, council. My name is Corey Martin. I live at 116 25th Street Southwest. I guess for me, I was fortunate enough to be able to go to the church and have the meeting with these two gals that went way out of their way to try to form a group of us to object to this motion. But one of the things that some of the questions that were asked there have not been asked today, and I don't know if just me being able to ask them is what I want to do. One of the main concerns of this whole thing is because one of the construction companies working between 19th Street and 25th Street this summer had clipped one of the lighting wires. And when it came time to repair that wire and rehook, we were told that they couldn't do that because of the liability to the city because the system was old, which I appreciate. I've been living there since 77. And that whole area was built in the 50s. But why at that time was not the company that clipped the wire, that I'm sure was bonded and could have paid for some of this infrastructure improvement because it's no longer able to be used, if that was ever addressed. I don't know who I should ask that question to, or if it'll ever get answered. I don't know. But I think that should have been addressed as soon as it happened, and we realized as a city we were going to be liable if we turned them lights on.
I think Mr. Meyer is going to come and answer your question. I think. I mean, he walked up here, so.
We'll try. So, council members, utility hits happen. There's been a lot of infrastructure work, putting fiber optic into the ground throughout Minot, and we've had some hits here and there. This could have been one of them, but this isn't the driver of the project. It's the grounding issue that we had with the poles. And so that's what's driving the conversation, not the utility hit. Usually when those get hit, we do a splice and life goes on.
Sir, did that
Thank you, Lance.
help illuminate things?
Is there anybody else who wishes to address the council?
Why weren't the lights addressed during the aftermath of the flood? Like when all the roads were getting redone and everything, why were the lights not addressed then?
Lance? We've got Lance behind you. He's going to answer or try to address.
After the flood, we went to several neighborhoods, and there was two things that happened. Typically, what would happen is if the feed point was submerged, so that's the power source for the lighting systems, we would gut that and replace the interior components. This neighborhood, it's a bit of a combination. Some are up on poles. It's just basically like a hand switch, and some are actual feed points. So probably the feed points were rehabbed. Each individual pole, if there was some issue that was happening, we'd fix the feed point, but the lights weren't coming on, then staff would go around or contractors and they would check the fuses. If the fuses were good, then generally the system was fine. So we didn't have actually a lot of expenses after the flood and the street lighting. It was more fixing the actual power source or the feed point itself. And that's probably why, we didn't know of the issue until recently.
Okay. Thank you, Lance.
If I may,
Harold?
if I may, Mr. Mayor, at the risk of continuing to move forward with questions, which I think we're all happy to answer, but for the sake of this meeting, I don't know if there's any interest in this now that the council has made a decision, but if the neighborhood wants to invite me to another meeting, I'd be happy to come and bring the appropriate staff to help answer questions. I wish we could have done this before we got to the point where council was making a decision this evening. But if that is helpful, I would be happy to offer that. If someone could reach out to my office, I would be happy to schedule that and bring the appropriate staff to make sure that we answer all the questions from the neighborhood regarding this project, and potentially have a conversation about how communication went and how we can improve communication from us to citizens in the future.
Continuing on with personal appearances, if there's anybody who wishes to address the council, now's your opportunity. Last call. Seeing none, we will move on to action item number 10. That's miscellaneous and discussion items. 10.1, updates with the Minot Downtown Business and Professional Association. I believe that is Mr. Wright.
Good evening, Mayor Ross, members of City Council. Just wanted to come to you this evening just to provide some updates on the Minot Downtown Business and Professional Association, also known as the DBPA. Just provide you some information and tell you some different projects that we're working on and that kind of stuff. First of all, who we are. We are 114 members. There's 114 members that are part of the Downtown Business and Professional Association who they donate money by way of membership dues and investments. There are 9 board members that are mainly business owners downtown. Out of all the different members and the board members, there's members where they pay a membership fee, membership due, an annual membership due to be a member. And then there's also investors, and then there's also supporters like myself. Supporters aren't necessarily business owners downtown. Supporters may just be somebody in the public similar to myself. I work for Noetta Hidatsa Sanish College in Newtown. But since I moved to Minot 6 years ago, I have invested an incredible amount of time downtown, donating my time, trying to make downtown better. We have, as I mentioned, we have 9 board members. We have a part-time contractor who helps us with some of the administrative support for some of our events. We do not have any employees. We are all volunteers. We do have an events committee that meets on a weekly basis that helps plan some of the events that you guys see and participate downtown. And we also have a membership committee that meets every other week, and we talk about different members and meeting with different members that are downtown trying to get grow the membership. So that's why we've been able to achieve 114 members so far. I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you. I've seen all of you downtown participating in downtown events. I've seen all of you downtown talking to constituents, and I want to thank you for that. Thank you for finding budget to move forward with the quiet zone, the wayfinding signage. Thank you for approving the first phase of that. We hope that in the future there can be phases 2 and 3. We think that I know it's grandiose, but we do think it's a beautiful asset to the community and especially downtown. I want to go on the record for thanking Alderwoman Olson for initiating dialogue about the parking situation downtown. We look forward to having more meetings about those types of issues that challenge the downtown area. Thank you for supporting the facade program. We ask for continued support of the expansion of this program to help downtown businesses owners to improve the upper floors of their buildings. For the buildings, for the businesses that have participated in the facade improvement program, it's fantastic. I think it's great work, looks really nice. So the situation that we're in is we do not have a reliable stream of income. We do have our events, we make a little bit of money on events. Typically year over year, we break even on events. So most of the money that we receive is by people donating money to be a member of the DBPA. So what are we doing? We have historically been known for wine walks. Seen some of you guys during the Fall Festival, the Christmas tree lighting. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. Historically, that's what the DBPA has been known for. Within the past couple of years, it seemed to pivot a little bit and kind of evolve. Now that we've received metropolitan status, we see the need to grow into a new role and expand our scope. With that said, we're establishing a 501c3 called the Minot Downtown Beautification Association. Once we're in the process of writing the bylaws, forming the board and all that type of stuff, once we get that set up, we will be able to open ourselves up for more charitable donations. There's different grants that we can pursue and possibly and hopefully maybe we can be the recipient of some gaming dollars. In the meantime, some of the projects that we've been using our donated dollars for is within the next week or two, you're going to see trim lights. We started on one block going from Magic City Suites down to Drop Zone. So far, we've done one block, and we do have plans of doing the entire downtown in time, but the price tag on that's approximately $100,000. So that's what we're using our donated dollars for. I have some asks. We are asking to continue to collaborate on several items of interest. I think you guys have done a fantastic job. Thank you very much for making city staff available to answer questions. I've seen each and every one of you downtown at public input meetings and talking with constituents. Again, thank you very much for that. We don't have all the answers, as I'm sure you guys understand too. We don't have all the answers to the issues revolving downtown. What we do have is a lot of people that are interested in trying to find solutions. We encourage more conversations with more city staff to try to find these solutions. I think we can find compromises along the way. There's quite a few damaged curbs downtown that need to be addressed. We have a dream of more public restrooms, along with changing stations and water fountains, more trash barrels, maybe pick up as necessary, especially after Thursday nights on Main Street. There's a lot of trash left over after that. Please enforce the parking zones a little bit better. I think some of the problems that we do have, if we just enforce some of the rules and some of the parking rules that we have already, I think a lot of them problems would take care of themselves. Snow removal. I'm not going to get into it too much. It's just a constant conversation. We're willing to do whatever. If there's a compromise, if there's a hard conversation, if we need to have late night conversations and people to get involved, if we need to survey people, whatever we can do. I don't want to say that we're doing our best. I believe that the word best has a ceiling to it. So I want to do everything that we can possibly do to have conversations and try to come up with compromises and solve these issues that are downtown. Trinity, I know that there's been some investors. We would like to be more involved with some of the Trinity conversations. I know that I've heard that there's been some investors that are interested in investing in downtown, but it's just they want to kind of know what's going to be happening with the Trinity buildings before they make a big investment. In conclusion, the board members went to the Carnegie Center last year and where the retail coach explained to us that we have the same amount of visitors as the Walmart area, which was really telling for us. You know, that just kind of let us know, wow, there's a lot of traffic. There's a lot of people coming downtown, more than we realized at the time. So our hope is that once we have a little bit more reliable stream of income, as I had just described, that we can start to have deeper conversations about some of the parks that have been brought up, the snow, and that's some of the economic development. The overall consensus of people downtown is that we should take better care of what we have, and I believe we've taken those first steps. I'm available for questions or comments.
Are there any questions for Chad? Scott?
Mr. Wright, first off, thank you for coming. You mentioned the need for public restrooms, something I've worked on a day or two in my life. Obviously, the building here has public restrooms that are available. Have you guys taken advantage of having that open later on in the night when you're having events?
Not that I know of, but I'll make a note of it.
Claire, the doors, it's only open till, we only keep those doors open. My understanding is business hours. We are trying, is that correct, Lance?
But we can keep them open
If I may.
if arrangements are made. So like on Thursday nights, I believe we have been keeping them open later.
So we did design the basement or the bathrooms downstairs, which would be coming off the north entrance. Those were designed that we could secure the rest of the building, and those bathrooms could be made available upon request. You are correct in that the system currently locks them at a specific time.
Right.
But on request, if you have an event going on downtown, that can be requested, and we can make those bathrooms available publicly without providing access to the rest of the building. I've had one request to date, which I think we just did here like 2 months ago.
Okay.
Where we had an event downtown, that request was made, and we made those bathrooms available during that time period.
So make those requests, Chad.
Absolutely.
Who do they make them to?
And this is,
To my office.
Okay.
and this is the type of dialogue that I'm looking for, you know,
Yeah.
just conversations like this.
And if I can just
Go
say
ahead,
that
Scott.
when you do that, please advertise it as such too for people with mobility impairments that oftentimes have a hard time using traditional bathrooms or the bathrooms that are available downtown. That's a big drawing point. So
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Steve?
Just a comment. I had my professional office downtown for 17 years, and I really liked the amenities, and I'm seeing a lot of growth and a lot of improvement downtown. The only thing I struggle with occasionally is we hear from people who complain that downtown is getting all of our attention and money, like with the facade improvement programs. And I don't know if I'm suggesting a public relations campaign, but I think the broader community might benefit from being reminded of the value of a vibrant downtown, and that it's not an either-or situation. I think when downtown grows and gets better, the whole community benefits from it. But I think there's still a segment of the population that, you know, sees it as one versus the other. And I know that our Renaissance Zone, for example, isn't just limited to downtown, contrary to what some people believe. But I think that messaging of downtown benefits everybody perhaps needs to be, you know, reiterated occasionally. I miss not being downtown anymore. I go downtown as often as I can, and it's been really very good to see the growth and the improvement. I think financing some of these improvements will be an issue. I always worry about the snow because there's just not much place to put it. And I appreciate you bringing kind of your laundry list of concerns and areas for us to work together on before us today. And I hope that we will continue to pay attention and continue to do what we can in terms of financial support. So keep up the good work, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, you know, and that's kind of we're going with the momentum that we're getting. You know, we're really gaining a lot of momentum downtown, you know, and we feel that, you know, with it becoming larger, you know, we're being asked to be involved with some public policy stuff, economic development, and we're willing to donate more hours and volunteer more. So that's not the problem. It's just more conversations, it seems. Deeper conversations, harder conversations.
Are there any other comments or questions? Thank you, Chad.
Thank you.
Do we need that clarification now before
I'll
we
just
move
make
on?
it just in case.
Okay, go ahead, Carrie.
Clarifying the motion on the street lighting district, ensuring that it reads and along with the accepting the bids, approving the budget amendments. Correct, Michaela?
Correct.
Is that okay with the second,
Yes.
Steve? Okay. Any objection from the council for that change? Or
I think it was
clarification?
I think it was implied. I don't know that it was
Right,
audibly
I mean, it
stated,
just,
so
the motion was to like literally verbatim take what the recommendation was on the memo.
Yeah, the motion, from what I heard, was to award the bid to Maine Electric, and then we kind of got into
Yeah,
discussion.
no,
so-
that language was also in the recommendation, so I just wanted to, okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to item 10.2 on the agenda, that's the housing study presentation with Brian and Tom.
Good evening, Mayor Ross and members of the council. Back in May, the city selected Stantec to perform a housing study in the Minot metropolitan area. We kicked that project off in June. And since that time, Stantec has been gathering data on our housing conditions within the community, and they've been meeting with stakeholders. We're at about the midpoint of our project right now, and they're here to give a presentation tonight on some of the data points that they have found. The presentation in your packet is about 90 pages long. We're not going to go through every slide tonight. We're going to give an abbreviated presentation tonight, but you're welcome to go to the city council packet to view the entire presentation. So this time I'd like to introduce Tom Layton of Stantec. He's going to give the presentation tonight. And Tom has a couple of members of his team here in person and on Teams as well. So Tom, the floor is yours.
Brian has been great to work with, as has other staff in Minot. I'm very appreciative of being here and speaking with you. I'm here with my colleague Will Hutchings from Bismarck. My colleague Spencer Cox, I think, is on the line and is one of our lead researchers. So if there are technical questions, I may turn to Spencer for those. I hope you're not disappointed that I won't go through all those 95 slides on the research phase of this project. It has been a really interesting study, and I think your interest in doing an in-depth housing study for Minot speaks a lot to the feeling that I've felt in the room here as you've talked through other issues, that there's a deep investment in the community in understanding what the challenges are in the community, realizing that it is meeting, your housing stock now specifically is meeting some important needs. It could meet other needs better. So as we approach a study like this, we work to develop an in-depth understanding of the market and the housing inventory, not for its own sake, but to set up some potential strategies that you can pursue, well, to help you initially to see with more focus some of the needs in the community, and then to set up some strategies that you can consider for meeting those housing needs better. So I have I whittled these slides down to half of the original slides, and I plan to still skip through some, because as I practice this, I realize it's going to take me too long. So Brian gave me a 20-minute time frame for a presentation. One of the things that I want you to, one of the values for coming to at this point, when we've done our research and analysis phase of the project, is that it gives you a chance to think about the community, think about the housing in the community, think about the housing market, and to let that be a little more deeply in your consciousness prior to thinking about strategies. So that's the intent tonight. There's no action. It's just a review of some of our key findings. So next slide, please. So we're going to do several things today. I'm going to provide a very brief overview of the project. We're going to talk about a summary of our research findings so far in under four topic areas. I'm going to, as a result of that and some other information gathering that we've done, I'm going to tee up some initial thoughts about what we're seeing as some of the pressing housing needs in Minot. At that point in time, I do want to stop and invite you to fill in that picture, to respond to that, to say, I think these are some of our other pressing needs, or I agree with that, or I just want to think about that some more. So we'll have a little discussion at that point in time. And I'm at 3 minutes, so 17 minutes left. So, excuse me, we'll start with project overview. Next slide, please. And I've just, in this slide, just divided the project into these phases that I talked about. We really have a robust process for understanding the housing inventory and the housing stock in some very detailed ways that we'll talk to you about. And as I said, that moves us to a strategies phase where we think about those priority needs and a range of ways that we might tailor, you might attract more housing or stabilize existing housing that meets those needs. These are not the strategies that we're proposing for Minot that are on the slide in that middle section. It's just an example of the kind of strategies we might discuss. And the third thing I wanted to note is that an important element of this project is to invite input from the public. And we're doing, and one of the reasons that's so important is because when you're just working with numbers and data, oftentimes you can miss the human story. And so we're inviting, through a housing survey, we're inviting people to talk about their own housing story and what they've faced. And that's available to you as well, and we encourage you to check that out. Next slide, please. Economics and demographics. This gets as you, if you reviewed our initial presentation, you know that we went very deep in this. So, but I'll talk about some highlights. Next slide. The black line here is Ward County. So in this, it's intended to illustrate the economic production, the GDP output of Ward County over this period of time. And you can see, different from most of the lines on that chart, that it rose rapidly, and then it has reduced. The economic output has reduced since about 2014. And that's solely due to the oil boom in Minot. Next slide, please. Another really key sector is the first bar on this chart. As we disaggregate your economy into economic sectors, you can see that government and government enterprises is by far the leading employer in Minot, and that's not the city of Minot, that reflects the Air Force Base. And so compared to the diamond, which represents that share of the economy or employment in North Dakota as a whole, it's a strong contributor to the economy. Next slide, please. I'm going to skip this one. Next slide. This just looks at, you can see that there's a large population, working population that lives in Minot and works in Minot. That's in the overlap of these two overlapping circles. But there are significant numbers of people who come into Minot to work and significant numbers of people who leave Minot for work, live in Minot and leave Minot for work. There are more people coming in for work than there are that leave. Next slide. And you can see on the left that those who come in to Minot to work, by and large, or the great majority of those live in Ward County. Whereas on the right, those who live in Minot and leave Minot for work go to more different destinations when they leave for work. Next slide, please. I just want to summarize the really strong economic base of Minot, with the Air Force, which is a fairly steady employer, serving as a regional hub for medical and retail, and then the petroleum economy, the oil economy that comes here, that it puts some turbulence into your economy. But that's a really nice platform of base economic industries. Next slide, please. The thing I want to emphasize on this slide, Minot again, is the black line. You can see, using 2010 as a base, that the population might not increase more than any of the comparison cities on this slide. We chose 4 comparison cities that we felt like were similar to Minot, and then you can see it compared to Ward County in North Dakota. So a rapid rise in population, and then it's been fairly stable since 2015. Next slide, please. This slide breaks it down by population, inherent population growth in the blue, and the in-migration and out-migration in the purple. And you can see when you're just looking at the change year to year, where those middle years where there was an increase in population, and since about 2015 where there's actually been some decline in population. Next slide, please. This is a slide where the age bands are clustered for each city. And the things that stands out about Minot, which is on the very left, is the high percentage of folks that are age 20 to 35. And you know the reason for that. Next slide, please. I'm going to skip this one. Next slide. This is a study that also shows household income in bands for each of these geographies. And the lowest income is on the left, and the highest income is on the right within each of these geographies. And it's notable to me that it's a very balanced income spectrum in Minot. You could compare it, for example, to North Dakota, which is 2 geographies to the right. Very balanced income spectrum in Minot. Next slide, please. I'm going to skip this one. This one shows what I think you all have an intuitive sense of, is that in terms of the geography of that household income, there are parts of Minot that are higher income neighborhoods and parts of Minot that are lower income neighborhoods, and we can map that. Next slide, please. Minot in this slide is the black line, and it shows that 55% of Minot's households are owner-occupied or own their home, and 45% are renters. And you can see that number has declined for 2 reasons. One is the boom in apartment construction in the early 2010s, and the other is some conversion to rental housing of single-family home stock. Next slide, please. This is the last slide related to demographics, and this just highlights the percentage of folks who live in Minot that are paying 30% or more of their income on their housing costs. And when you're paying more than 30% of your income on your housing costs, that's considered housing cost burden, because in particular for low-income people, it just really pinches the amount of your income stream that's available for all of the rest of life expenses. So Minot is not unusual here, but 45% of renters in Minot are paying 30% or more of their incomes on their housing costs. 20% of homeowners are paying more than 30% of their income on their housing costs. And this is next slide, please. If you look on the graph at the right, this is something that has increased over time. If we were to look at a time lapse of that, there's a lot more housing cost burden folks today than there were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and that's pretty universal. And the slide on the right is the reason for that. It shows rents, how they've gone up over time compared to home values and compared to income. So both home values and rents, or home costs and rents, have increased quite a bit compared to incomes in the last 10 years. And we're feeling that all over the US and in Minot. Next slide, please. Skip this one. So just some takeaways here. Young adults are overrepresented. Note that education attainment is a bit lower than other communities, but than some of the comparison communities, but median incomes is very similar to other communities. And I noted the housing cost burdens. Next slide. Then we took a careful look at the inventory of housing here. Starting with this one, we're calling a consolidated housing inventory map. This shows the different types of housing, and yellow is single-family homes, but you can also see brown is apartments, and the larger apartments are also circled. Blue are townhomes and condominiums. You have mobile homes. There's a very wide assortment of different types of housing that people can choose in Minot. Next slide, please. This one shows single-family neighborhoods by the decade or 20-year periods in which those homes were constructed. And like a lot of cities, the older homes are near the center, and you can just see them move out. Next slide. This is a slide of all of the senior housing in Minot, and you can see we've categorized that by type. One other thing that stood out to us when we looked at this information was there hasn't been new single housing development in Minot, although you've got an aging population. There hasn't been new senior housing developments in Minot for a while. So that's certainly something we're conscious of as we move into the next phase. Next slide, please. And we have a similar map of affordable housing inventory. This you can see is geographically well spread, and this does seem like there has continued to be steadily new developments that have occurred even in the last decade. Next slide. And this map highlights all new multifamily housing since 2010, and I think it's kind of dramatic, the number of multifamily housing developments that have been built in Minot since 2010. Now, the vast majority of those were built up till 2015. Very few, in fact, I don't think there have been any market rate apartment buildings built since then until the Epic building that's under construction right now. Next slide. This slide just reminds us that in addition to housing development in Minot, there are also census block group areas where the net in terms of housing units is negative. You've lost some housing units, and obviously that's due to the flooding. I'm not going to review these. I think I've touched on these takeaways as we've looked at the map. So next slide. So to get a feeling for the market context for housing, we look at a couple of things. Next slide. The most obvious indicator of housing demand is the development that has been occurring. So we've talked a little bit about, and I actually like the exhibit on the right of this slide. We've talked a little bit about the boom in construction and the slowdown in construction, and now it seems like there may be some resuming again, so that's a positive sign. But you can see the housing development, and particularly that surge in the early 2000s. Next slide. And here's another view of the same information. These are apartment buildings that are tracked by CoStar, which is our most reliable market data source for multifamily housing, and you can see that they're all clustered around that 2009 to 2015 range by and large. Next slide. The other key indicators we look at to understand is there demand for new housing is rents and vacancy rates. And as rents rise and vacancy rates go down, so there's less vacancy, that's a signal to developers that there may be demand for new housing products. Now, it might not be, it's a two-edged coin, because rising rents is not beneficial to renters. But looking at the market signals, you can see here the purple line is the rent trajectory, and rents as the oil boom ended really actually reduced, they declined, and the last few years they've been rising again. Next slide, please. I'm going to skip this one. On this one, we're overlaying that with the vacancy rate, and the blue line actually in this case is the exact same rent trajectory that I showed on the previous slide. And the purple line shows the vacancy rate, and you can see at the end of the oil boom, vacancies were around 14-15%. And as folks moved out of the region, rents dropped. And those units that were built were absorbed little by little to where they came down to more of a normal market vacancy rate in 2021, 2022, 2023. So that 5%, 4% lower vacancy rate now is a signal that developers pay attention to, that that housing stock has been absorbed. It may be time to look at projects. Next slide, please. We have one slide in this abbreviated deck that looks at home values. And if you look at the black line in the exhibit on the left, that's Minot's home values, and it follows a really similar trajectory to what we saw with rents. Home values decreased in the the late part of the 2010 decade and have been rising again. Next slide, please. It's important to tell you that as we try to understand the market, the inventory, all these things, that we're not just looking at numbers. We're also talking to folks that have a deep understanding of the market. So we've reached out to many local developers, both in Minot, but also in other regions that are working on in housing types that we may want to attract to Minot, as well as talking with stakeholders. And Brian has been terrific at lining up a whole set of conversations for us every time we've come to Minot. Next slide, please. I'll skip this one. I think we've talked about this one. The final thing that we did in this research phase is we tried to, so we're understanding the demand for housing. We drill down into that understanding to understand how does that divide out between people at different income levels? How are their needs being met? People who want to own, people who want to rent, and people who want housing units of different sizes. Next slide, please. And I'm not going to obviously read this, but we build a database that I don't know of anyone else in our line of business that does this, where we take all of the recent information that we can get through home sale data, through rent listings, and we apply that to your parcel data set. And that allows us to, for your entire housing inventory, estimate rents, rental versus ownership, home values across your entire housing data set. And that allows us, if you advance 2 slides, please. That allows us to break down your Minot's housing inventory in this way. You can see that the inventory that's affordable to households earning different income levels, those income levels are on the left side of that chart, different income levels. At the top, you can see units of different sizes and whether they're rental or ownership units. So an estimate of your entire inventory is on this chart. And what it shows is the green is where there's a high number of units of those type. And you've got a tremendous amount, partly because of that big rush in apartment building that were similar product. You've got a tremendous amount of 2-bedroom apartments. That's the darker green on this slide. Affordable at, to households earning $35,000 to $50,000 a year. Go to the previous slide, please. We have an entirely different methodology for drilling down into your population base and their preferences for rental or ownership, their income levels, and to make determinations about what kind of housing they're looking for. That's what this shows, is your population and what kind of housing they would prefer. And again, the darker colors are sets of population that prefer that type of housing. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. And this is a slide that puts them together. It shows your demand for housing by all these parameters minus your housing stock at each of these levels. The dark red number shows that you actually have more 2-bedroom apartments at this price point than you have population that are looking for that precise product. Now, they're occupied, but it may be, likely many of them are occupied by people who would be interested in a lower cost apartment, or people who would be looking for an apartment at a different number of bedrooms. The blue numbers are where you have deficits. And particularly you can see on the rental side that there Deficit's not surprising in apartments that are more affordable, one-bedroom and two-bedroom apartments that are more affordable. Next slide, please. I'm going to skip this one, and just do a final takeaway on this section of the report. So you've got a nice amount of middle income and workforce housing. We see a need for, or the data shows a need for rental housing and even ownership housing that's more affordable. That's not unusual. It also, I didn't pause on this, but it also shows a potential demand for housing that's a little bit higher end. So that's something to pay attention to and something we can explore more. Next slide. So here's where summarize what for us is kind of a takeaway. Next slide. In terms of some of the housing needs in Minot that we see sort of rising to the top. One of them is continued development of affordable rental housing. Minot has been doing a good job in supporting the development of affordable rental housing, but you can see the demand for that is also increasing. Second is starter homes. So on the ownership side, a similar thing. And some of this is occurring, but can that flow be increased? And can it include some products that may even serve people at a lower price point? The third one is this executive homes or higher priced homes. And those don't have to all be ownership, but to set up an environment that's attractive for your, hospital executives or business executives as a way of attracting that higher income workforce to Minot is something that a lot of communities have invested some attention in. And then the final one, as we've mentioned, is senior housing. So that concludes the presentation, and I did go over by 3 minutes, so I apologize for that. But this is a point I thought it would be really valuable to just pause and just interested in your reaction to the information. I know you've had a long night, but your reaction to the information, are there questions? How does this align with your experience? What do you see as, key housing needs in Minot? So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Layton? Any comments? Steve?
Yeah, I found this very interesting, and even more so than just dealing with housing, things about the demographics of our community, the economics of our community. This is a very intriguing report. I actually scanned all 86 pages when I first got it. I should have been doing other things, but it really was very interesting. And I think it generally was consistent with what I've sensed kind of anecdotally and subjectively, and I think what people have talked about, the need for more affordable housing. And it was an interesting surprise that you saw a need for executive housing, as you put it. When I walk around the community, there's sure a lot of nice, very expensive homes that I certainly can't afford, but evidently there are some people who can afford them. The senior housing, too, I think we've heard before of various organizations wanting to build complexes, particularly by the new hospital. At one point, there was very extensive planning for a complex there, and there's several in the southeast portion of town. Evidently, there's still more need for that. I think your study gave to me a very intriguing picture of the community, and again, it generally fits with what I've observed and what we've talked about. I think obviously the challenge is how do we incentivize people to build inexpensive housing? We keep hearing that it's government regulations and bureaucracy gets in the way. I'm not so sure. I know we've done a good job, I think, in making smaller lots. We've replatted many areas of town to allow more flexibility with the kinds of homes that people are building. And we've also changed those lot sizes as the market has changed. Things originally were set up for larger single-family homes have been downsized. So I think the city has been actually quite flexible and quite responsive. Now, if we could just stimulate more of a market, and I think your data show that there are markets. Whether they're profitable markets is another question. But I was very impressed with the study, and I think it's again thought-provoking.
Thank you, Steve. Any other comments or questions? Scott?
So I'm not exactly sure how to ask this question, so I'll try to do the best I can. You saw, on the graphs you showed there, when you showed kind of as the cost of housing has continued to rise, obviously we were at a peak during the oil boom and then kind of dropped, and now it's coming back up again. At what point does it fiscally make sense in this economy to really stimulate growth again? Because since 2014, the cost of everything has increased significantly, from labor to construction goods and everything else. So at what point would the market naturally begin to create that environment? Is that a number that's known? Does that make any sense, what I'm asking, I guess?
Part of what I hear in your question is, do we have enough housing? If we stimulate more housing now, are we overproducing housing? And I don't, I can't think of a way that, let me say, I think about that question a little bit differently, okay? Part of our job here is to tee up some potential strategies for attracting housing, either that is underrepresented types or perhaps a greater flow of housing in general. So there certainly are niches that we might see are lacking. I think there's value in playing appropriate partnership roles. Again, this would be for your consideration, appropriate partnership roles that might stimulate production generally. And we have seen this in different communities, and there are different models for doing this. I think those are ways. I think you're at a position right now where you tend to have affordable housing compared to a lot of communities, and you've benefited from, in some ways, that oversupply. When there are practices that continue to foster, a healthy production of housing, that allows, on a community-wide basis, just by the way housing demand and supply works on a community-wide basis, that supports continued affordable housing on a community-wide basis. So that's the way I don't think there's a threshold that you've built all the housing you need and you shouldn't build more. I think strategies for increasing production have multiple benefits, and particularly in the areas where we're seeing deficits.
You good? Any other questions? Comment? What's a healthy vacancy rate?
The market equilibrium vacancy rate is often considered to be about 5%. And there are a lot of communities in these recent years that have been below that, and it has, they're not in the same cycle that Minot is in. They're in a different cycle, and they've been below that, and it's been, and it has generated a lot of new housing production.
Steve?
Do you think the private sector is capable enough of exploiting the needs you've identified? Or is it something that the city needs to be doing more to incentivize or push or goad or whatever? Do you think the forces you're talking about, the market forces, are enough to lead to what we want?
I think we're going to be able to have a deeper conversation about that when we bring some answers back. But let me tell you this about some of our process. When we reach out, for example, I don't think we've had our interviews, Spencer could correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we've had our interviews with the senior housing developers. There aren't any currently in Minot. We're reaching out to some who are working in North Dakota. When we talk with them about, and these will be people who have done projects in Grand Forks or Fargo recently or Bismarck, when we talk to them about, we want to sit down with you and understand, what you've been building, and talk to you about Minot and the particular, some of what's going on here and what we see as their needs and opportunities, and get your perspective on that. We not only get a a good understanding of what they think, we pique their interest, number one. Number two, we get an understanding of what they think it would take for them if they think there's, to your question, Alderman Padragula, if they think that it may take an incentive to bring them to Minot, we get an understanding of what that would look like. And so we end up in this process having a fairly detailed idea, at least on a qualitative level, of what things we can foster, sort of organically on a strictly market basis, and what things would require some public sector participation. Now, if there's a, 5-year property tax incentive to attract a senior housing developer, that may well be something that Minot would want to consider. That doesn't compete with your general fund monies. That just forgoes by 5 years the money that's coming into the general fund. So we can tee up all those conversations for you as we continue in the process. And some of these strategies are going to relate to specific real estate sectors like that. Other strategies may have to do with preservation, property conditions, regulatory changes, as you saw on that other slide.
So there's more in this, more that you're going to be doing?
This is the research and analysis. Next, why don't you go to the next slide? I can reiterate sort of our project scope. This was just the left-hand half of the project, the research and analysis scope. Wanted to share that out with you. So we're going to be doing some additional research related to housing strategies, related to bringing you case studies of things that have been done in other communities that meet housing needs. And we're really going to work hard to try to find North Dakota-based case studies in some of these areas. So yes, there's a whole nother chapter.
What kind of time frame are we looking at?
I think Brian was reminding me that it's February, March timeline by the time this process is over, but I would say 2 or 3 months until we'd be ready to come back to you and talk about strategies.
Thank you. I'll be very interested in that.
Any other comments or questions?
Just along that line, and here
Go
on
ahead.
this slide, again, you mentioned earlier the housing survey and the community engagement. I know I've seen that being shared out and those kinds of things. What's the timeline? How long will that survey be available for the general public to provide their input?
Yeah, I think and Will could correct me on this if I'm wrong. I think we're letting that run 4 to 6 weeks. Is that right, Will? Yeah. End of November, okay.
Well, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Moving on to item number 11. Go ahead, Steve.
Quick question, if I could. How much does this cost us?
If I remember correctly, it was about $100,000 that we budgeted to run this study, this full comprehensive study. The goal, again, was to have this back February, March timeframe before we start into the very significant process of strategic planning with the council, the retreat as we go into the budget process next year and start talking about fiscal year 2025.
So it'll be part of the 100,000?
Everything that he has outlined on the current slide up here is all included in the 100,000.
Yeah, I was on the committee that helped choose Stantec as the company, and I mean, we got a lot of bang for our buck.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think this has been an incredibly appropriate and wise investment. It could guide our development for years.
Yep.
The intent was to provide concrete data and evidence so that we could assess the growth and health of our community going forward and make intentional decisions on where to be involved and where to encourage growth and those kinds of things in ways that would have the impacts that we want them to have. So as you saw earlier, there's some areas that we have surplus in, so we don't want to incentivize growth in that area, but there may be some other areas. When I say incentivize growth, I don't necessarily default to that means that we're giving city taxpayer dollars to make that happen. We may be discussing other ways to help encourage that type of growth. And I think that'll be the next phase here that they'll be working on and that they will be returning back to talk about in February or March.
To me, this seems like a very good investment, an excellent investment.
Any other comments? If not, we'll move on to item number 11 on the agenda. That's adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 We're adjourned.